Yeah, dear Thorsten Bargfrede, Deputy Head of the European Delegation to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Thorsten Bargfrede is currently representing the European ambassador to Sri Lanka, who is still in a meeting with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but who will join us very soon, hopefully. Dear Hubertus von Welk, Head of the Sri Lanka and Bangladesh Country Office of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom. Dear Markus Löning, former Commissioner of Human Rights of the German government and former Member of Parliament of the German Bundestag and CEO of Löning Consultancy, Human Rights and Responsible Business. Dear panelists, distinguished guests, as the Chief Delegate of German Industry and Commerce in Sri Lanka, I'm very delighted to welcome you today to our kickoff conference on our joint initiative on sustainable supply chains as drivers for global competitiveness. We thank explicitly the Friedrich Naumann Foundation and Löning Consultancy for supporting and partnering with us. Today's conference will be followed by a series of general awareness and sectorial trainings, in-house assessments, as well as a final certification for the participating companies. In the first phases, we will concentrate ourselves on three sectors: apparel, textile, rubber, and food and agriculture. In a second phase, we are currently in discussions with our partners. We would extend the initiative to the tourism industry, as it is of huge importance also to make tourism service providers more competitive through the certification of sustainability in their activities. The major reason why we decided to join the initiative was that we see a current need for support for Sri Lankan exporters to get a broader market access and to increase their global competitiveness. Today, sustainability rules are a reality, a regulatory reality already in the European Union, the US, and many other markets. They are partially political driven, but they are also very much consumer and industry driven. And besides the existing officially legally binding standards, there are a lot of European standards that are required by European importers that are purely customer and industry driven. So standards, for example, which has a holistic approach like fair trade, covering social, economic and environmental aspects, but also standards regarding social compliance, labor-related standards, good manufacturing practices, and so on. Many of the Sri Lankan exporters today already fulfill the requirements, but they sometimes lack of the required documentation. And the documentation and the transparency of this documentation is required by the importers. On a certain level, as I said, it is required by law already, but on a different level, it is today already required by retailers and importers in the European Union and other countries. For certain industries in Sri Lanka, sustainability standards have been, for a long time, they have been played for many years a very important role, and a very positive example is the apparel sector. Already in 2006, the 60 Joint Apparel Federation initiated the campaign Garments Without Guilt, which was much related to labor and social standards, and it conducted to the fact finally that Sri Lanka was recognized as a low-risk sourcing destination. I think that was a huge success. It was driven majorly also by the large players here in our field of apparel, and therefore also we are very delighted to have here one of the pilots of the project, the COO of MIS, Mr. Shirenda Lawrence, who will later on give the keynote speech on sustainability standards and the reference on their own business, but also for the entire sector. We know that also in the food industry there was a continuous process since the 1st of January 2020. Good manufacturing practices and national standards, national GMP standard has become obligatory here in Sri Lanka for the national market. I think that's also a very important step into the right direction, because we have conducted many talks with companies. Our second panelist here, like Target Agriculture, confirming that already today, of course, GMP is something that is required by most of the importers of food and agricultural products already in the European Union and in the US. And definitely it will become more and more important. Before I hand over to Mr. von Welk, I would like to underline that the European Union and the US, with a total market share of about 60%, have been for many years the two most important export destinations for Sri Lankan exporters. From a country perspective, Germany, behind the US and the UK, has been ranked in 2019 as the third most important export destination, with a total import volume of 753 million euros. In fact, we had also towards the European Union and also towards Germany during the last year digital growth, two-digit growth rates for the Sri Lankan exports to the EU and to Germany. And I would like to invite now our keynote speaker. Shirenda Lawrence has been in leading positions in the apparel industry for 25 years. And he has been the COO for MAS, the largest recognized business conglomerate in Sri Lanka, with more than 95,000 employees in 16 countries, and I think also the leading apparel company in South Asia. MAS has been a pioneer. You have been, I think, one of the first companies that have really taken it very serious to comply with sustainability standards, and I'm very thankful that you will share with us now your experience, what you had and what drove you to go into sustainability. Shirenda Lawrence, please.
Mr. Dennis Chebe, head of the delegation of the European Union to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Mr. Hubert von Welk on video conference today, head of the Sri Lanka and Bangladesh office for Frederick Naumann Foundation. Mr. Markus Loning, former Human Rights Commissioner of the German government. And of course, my good friend, Mr. Andreas Hogenrother, Chief Delegate of AHK in Sri Lanka. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And I'm delighted to be invited today to share a few thoughts of our journey at MAS in the space of sustainability, doing the right thing, and to perhaps give some thoughts on the impact it's had on our business that maybe would be helpful to some of you as you move forward, and perhaps through that also bring through the importance of programs like the one today, in bringing us in Sri Lanka a little bit closer and a bit more knowledgeable to the standards that are constantly changing in this space. I thought I'd start by talking a little bit about doing the right thing and compliance in general. It's said that doing the right thing is fundamental to creating and sustaining an effective organizational value system. They also say that great leaders do the right thing consistently. And as Dr. Martin Luther King said, it's always the right time to do the right thing. But sometimes doing the right thing can be contrary to general business rules. But for sure, it creates better organizations, results in happier customers, and builds more meaningful relationships and partnerships, which we all know today is absolutely essential for business sustainability. Compliance rather than doing the right thing, is a little bit more black and white, can sometimes be in conflict with what an individual or a corporate believes is doing the right thing, which in itself is somewhat more gray and subjective. Compliance can surely become a competitive advantage. Consumers want to support brands and service providers who are considered to be compliant, who in turn are comfortable to associate with supply chain partners like ourselves and many of you in the room today that they can trust, and not those with records of compliance violations. Dr. Anna-Marie Nadai, compliance officer at CIB Group, said, "Compliance is a fundamental pillar of any corporate operation and culture, and it should be based upon the principles of transparency, impartiality, responsibility, integrity, professionalism, and ethics." So it's quite a tall order, lots of boxes to tick along the journey. Talking a little bit about Sri Lanka, I'd certainly think that doing the right thing has always been part of the DNA of our country. And then this has carried through to the DNA of many, if not most, of our Sri Lankan conglomerates, who have, through this, built strong partnerships with global brands of repute. And it makes us a little unique in that way, in this part of the world, I truly believe. But when you get into it, such corporate practices and due diligence and doing the right things is progressed in these organizations for a number of reasons. Firstly, and particularly in relation to doing the right thing, it's driven by the values, ethics, and codes of conduct of our country, the corporate that we're speaking about, and of course the individuals who might lead them. But beyond that, there's a multitude of standards and codes that come into play. Starting with the codes that are often developed by the brands that we work with, the customers that they serve, and the corporate working with them is compelled to fall in line with those and adopt them. Then of course we have our national legislation. There are international standards we have to work to, set by organizations such as the United Nations, and of course the markets such as the European Union and what we're here to talk about today. And then there are industry standards which are independent standards that are very much more industry specific. In our industry, I've been in the industry for, as Andreas said, for some 25 years. I've seen the Ethical Trading Initiative. I've seen worldwide responsible apparel production transition over the years, and Sustainable Apparel Coalition more recently. So it's pretty complex. There are a lot of these standards that we have to look at in order to tick the box of being compliant. For all corporates, I think some combination of these is what shapes their own compliance. And in some organizations, they have to just work to all of them in some sort of a priority, maybe. So navigating your way through it can be a little challenging, and it's usually resolved through a sequence of prioritizing, or maybe adopting them all, as I mentioned. This is commonly a challenge, particularly for companies like ours as we go global, start off a Sri Lankan company, become regional, and then go global. We ourselves are in some 16 countries at the moment. And as you move into countries that you're less familiar with, what you learnt in one country may not necessarily support in another country. Having professionals on board who can fathom their way through this is quite challenging, and it's something that a lot of our Sri Lankan competitive companies, as we've gone global, have done a pretty good job of, and made it a competitive advantage in itself. Moving to the company that I'm privileged to have been with for a long time, at MAS, I spent the better part of the first 30 years of my life in Europe, and having returned to Sri Lanka in the mid-90s, I had a short list of companies at that time that I felt comfortable that I would like to be, that attracted me to them, and MS was right on top of that list. One factor for sure was that from its early days, MAS was known for its best-in-class working conditions within the industry and for treating its associates with dignity and respect. And doing the right thing was known to be a cornerstone from day one. Our sustainability journey is the outcome of our drive to continuously do better than we did before in every aspect of the business. Social responsibility, environmental responsibility, etc., etc. For decades, we worked tirelessly to strengthen our predominantly female workforce, giving them every opportunity to achieve more at work and in life. We are known for rethinking our strategies and reevaluating the impacts of our business to ensure a positive impact on our country and the world at large. Over 20 years ago, we evolved informal corporate social responsibility within our independent business units as we moved to 30, 40 locations around the country into a group-wide structured program run under the umbrella of Women Go Beyond, which has gone on to be recognized in many international forums. We worked with our employees and supported the communities around our facilities to elevate the standards of living, with particular focus on health and education. With the unfortunate tsunami of 2004, we strengthened and strategized our CSR initiatives, and post-2005, we commenced our journey to expand, elevate CSR to corporate environmental sustainability, as this was identified as the next stage of progress of our ethos to do the right thing. We established a program called Eco Beyond. It's an educational program for schools and the communities close to proximity of our manufacturing plants. And we did a few other things at that time to drive environmental sustainability across the organization. Thoroughly, our only greenfields project during around a decade where investment was not significant, became operational in 2008 and was the world's first purpose-built, LEED Platinum certified factory. And then we had the 2008-9 economic recession, and it meant we had to change gear. We switched to survival mode by streamlining the organization, rationalizing our customers and supply bases, and tightening overheads, as we're having to do at the present time. We had a vision, 1-1-10, to be the #1 preferred choice of our partners with a turnover of over $1 billion by the year 2010. That had to be put on hold. And focus became bottom line, cash flow management, all the things that we've all been talking about over the last 6 months. The importance of economic sustainability, the third leg of that story, was prioritized with strict adherence to lean principles and the likes, to come up with a toolkit of survival tools to see us through that time. CSR was not put on hold, it continued, but it was driven more by a culture of voluntary work than monetary investments, as the monies had to be diverted to other causes at that time. But as soon as we came out of the recession, again, we sat down as the leadership of the corporation, and in November 2009 brainstormed to strategize post-recession way forward for the corporation, and 5 strategic priorities were identified, one of which was to develop sustainability as a key competency and competitive advantage. So again, put it on hold, back on track and move forward. Sustainability continues to be a core pillar at MS with a clear commitment to drive sustainable manufacturing for the industry as well as its people. The founding principle has been mapped into this founding principle has been mapped into our sustainability strategy with an overarching objective of achieving its set sustainability goals by 2025. We continue to drive initiatives aligned under the UN Sustainable Development Goals through our own sustainability strategy. We are an equal opportunity employer with a stringent focus on creating an ethical and inclusive work environment and contributing to the communities in which we operate. In partnership with our people, we strive to drive economic and social growth, empower individuals, and contribute towards a more sustainable future for the next generation. More recently, the transformation of our sustainable business strategy has led to consolidation of social and environmental sustainability efforts into one central sustainability structure. And this brings together the strengths of the teams and alignment of goals to ensure that we're being consistent in our impact. In times of uncertainty, we have embraced a new purpose of inspiring sustainable change to help our people find meaning during an incredibly challenging time. While we continue to push the boundaries on different elements of sustainability, we continue to also ensure that standards are maintained within the working environment to ensure the health, safety, and security of our employees, as well as the confidence of our customers and external stakeholders, is maintained. In line with our founders' focus from the first day of operation, we continue to closely monitor and perform beyond expectations in our internal and external compliance parameters. We have worked tirelessly over the years to build strategic partnerships built on a philosophy of openness, trust, and mutual understanding. And nothing is more rewarding than when like-minded customers, of which we have many, invite us to partner with them or support us in our environmental or social responsibility efforts. It doesn't always go to plan. We've had our moments with 95,000 people or so in 16 countries, around 70,000 in Sri Lanka. We do have issues from time to time. But there are set processes for managing these. We have had occasions where the press has felt reason to investigate our business, and our approach has always been one of transparency, to welcome them in on the condition that their investigations are objective and balanced. Sometimes these are actually targeted at the brands we work with rather than ourselves as a corporation, and we then have to be respectful of their position and work with them to help navigate our way through what can sometimes be rocky waters. But on the other hand, there have also been occasions of triumph and give us a huge amount of satisfaction where our efforts have been recognized. In 2013, in observance of International Women's Day, our chairman, Deshamanya Mahesh Amalian, was recognized for exceptional leadership in championing women's empowerment and support of the Women's Empowerment Principles, a partnership initiative of the UN Women and the UN Global Compact. Mahesh was one of 5 global business leaders recognized with the UN Award at the Women's Empowerment Principles inaugural leadership awards presented in New York, where he received the award for cultural change for empowerment for our pioneering Women Go Beyond program. And more recently, Mahesh was honored with the Humanitarian Award at the Under Fashion Club's annual FEMI Awards Gala held just last year in 2019. I myself have been privileged on a number of occasions to be invited to speak at forums around the world. I was invited to the Worldwide Responsible Accredited Productions 10th Anniversary Conference in Fort Lauderdale a few years ago to speak about our experience in this part of the world, and to the United Nations in New York in 2015 to speak at Better Work Conference, that's ILO IFC conference, on our efforts following venturing into a new country where there were many challenges to be overcome. On that occasion, it was an interesting story where the brand wanted to go to a new country and invited us to do this with another one of their suppliers. And they asked us to scope the space, environmental, social responsibility in the country, and see what needed to be done to make sure that as the brand ventured into a new country, that they were in safe hands and little risk of being exposed for something that they certainly would not condone. So it's been an interesting journey, and as we meet today and talk about new standards and other standards, it is a very, very dynamic place. And I think the importance of education and being given opportunities just to understand what's new, what's going on, and what you need to do to stay ahead of the game is absolutely critical. It is one of those spaces where you have to be on the bus. There is no plan B. And that has always been what we have had in our minds at MS. And I think most larger Sri Lankan conglomerates have done likewise. The other thing I find interesting about this space is, unlike other areas where we compete, there's no competition here. We are here to do what we each can, and we're also there to support others who could learn from us, because we know that collectively we can make a difference. So I've always found that an interesting, particularly an interesting aspect of this particular space. Collectively, our impact is certainly unmeasurable. And we in Sri Lanka are known for being just that bit ahead of many others, and we certainly want to keep it that way. It's a journey with no end, but we will strive to keep moving forward and looking forward. With that, I'm going to end my little story. I hope it's been interesting, and if there's anything that we can do to support anyone else who's here in this room or on conference today, happy to do so outside of this. But thank you, Andres, and good luck with the program. Thank you.
Shirendra, for these very valuable insights. I think you very well underlined how committed MA is, but you also personally are into achieving sustainability goals, and that it is not only commitment, it is also a business case, because you have become really the role model, I think, for South Asia in the apparel industry. And you have seen, we have all seen that being committed to sustainability standards does not only cost money, but it will also give you market access and will make you more successful on the international. Shirendra, I wanted to ask maybe a final question also to you again. If we are talking about this made in Sri Lanka, I think there is a huge opportunity. There are a lot of challenges caused by COVID-19, but there are business opportunities as well for producers of PPE, and we have been discussing this. I think Sri Lankan apparel manufacturers are well-known, Garment Without Guilt, for sustainability standards, labor standards, highest quality standards, and we know that there will be an increasing demand for personal protection equipments, PPE. Sri Lanka is covering the entire chain, from the rubber gloves to the face masks, the protection suits, the protection shoes. Everything is covered by Sri Lanka, and I think it could be really a good business opportunity to market it very strategically, made in Sri Lanka, PPE made in Sri Lanka, as a quality brand related to sustainability standards, because I think in the future, when governments will be purchasing PPE, they will do it in a very well planned way, and then also sustainability standards will play a role. What is your opinion?
Thank you, Andres. I think I'd like to just touch on the previous question before I answer that, if I might, because I would endorse the ambassador's comment about standards, and by and large in Sri Lanka, because of the way we have evolved, we've generally been better when legislation becomes stronger than not. And there's always going to be winners and losers. Of course, the biggest issue in this current crisis is if the global market shrinks in an industry, there's only so much to go around. But I think net we stand in a better place to respond to higher standards and so on. So I think I'd like to look at the glass as half full rather than half empty in that sense. PPE also is another interesting space. I think when the situation arose, and we were probably less prominent in that sector than other countries. I don't think our raw material supply chain was as developed as it is in other areas of apparel, for example, which we have done over the years. I mean, part of the strength of the industry has come by the supply chain evolving in Sri Lanka and in the region, and leveraging on all of that. And I think when the PPE, referring specifically to clothing rather than other industries, because I think in other industries we already are quite strong. But in the apparel space, when this crisis hit, and the developed part of the world was crying out, as was other parts of the world, for support, we were able to pivot, and the larger companies all managed to do something, so that net we managed to secure a reasonable amount of business through that, and it actually got our factories operating in the apparel sector before the lockdowns were released under special permission, so it actually became a testing ground to getting back to business as well. What's going to happen now is there will be a couple of challenges. One, of course, will be the standards, because in that situation, the standards, it's not that they were dropped, but there was no choice. If you can, there's no supply in the market, and you can do something, and you do it. And we were able to move forward very quickly in that sense. So as the standards are reintroduced or tightened post-COVID, there will be time that we'll have to take to understand them and make sure that we are able to fit into that niche. The other challenge will be the supply chain, which was part of the biggest challenge even in this situation, because we don't have a mature supply chain in PPE at the present time. But again, those are initiatives can be put in place, so it is an opportunity.
Thanks a lot to the partners and the Friedrich Naumann Foundation and us invite now for a cocktail reception, and we will be able to continue our discussions then. Thanks a lot.